Okay, 89.2. Quick Science Corner. 2 weeks ago on the way back from shooting, my windshield got hit by a big pebble, and it knocked a little ding into the windshield. And I had to learn about what the deal is with windshield cracks. And the deal is that after you get a ding, a small one, you want to take some super glue or some other kind of penetrating glue and seal the crack. And the reason is that if you don't, water gets in the crack, and if you live in a part of the US where it drops below freezing, the water will freeze and it'll put force on the crack and make it bigger and bigger. So I glued up the hole in my windshield, and this last week when it's been really cold, I've been freaking out a little bit that it might get below freezing in LA, and it almost has. So anyway, glue up your crack. Okay, more science. Like, we've been arguing about abortion, and it appears to me that there are issues with abortion that will never be easily resolved, which makes me sad, because it's a sad thing, and two, because we've got so much more new stuff coming down the pike in the next 50 to 100 years about life itself, that if we can't solve abortion, we're not going to be able to solve, genetically tweaked kids. We're not going to be able to solve, rich people who are 140 years old, but still active because half their brain has been replaced with biocircuitry. Not going to be able to solve whether, what forms of artificial life and AI have rights. There are so many more new, complicated issues about consciousness, intelligence, life that are coming, and we can't even solve, an issue about birth and death that's been around for, since the beginning of birth and death. So things are just going to get weirder. What's really going to happen is rich people will continue to be able to, do what they want. The rich people have never had much of a problem having abortions whenever, probably. And rich people who want to live to 140 once the technology is available, and with all the rights of somebody who, of a century younger, will still be able to do it because they'll have the financial clout. But things are going to get weird. All right, what's the next thing? Bezos. Jeff Bezos, or Bezos, or however you say, richest man in the world, owns Amazon. About to give up half his fortune probably to his soon-to-be ex-wife because they're getting a divorce because Bezos has been having an affair with the most beautiful weather girl in Los Angeles. She's no longer a weather girl. She's been various kinds of reporter, Lauren Sanchez. But I remember when she was a weather girl, and all the weather girls in LA bust out of their blouses. They always have blouses that are about one size too small. And they always have that button gap where you've outgrown your shirt. And she was the most beautiful of the too small blouse weather girls. And she's been having an affair with Bezos.
Can you bend your back arm more?
Sure.
Okay.
And National Enquirer.
Not that much. Lean forward.
Okay. Blackmail.
Actually, lean away from me. That's it. That's good.
National Enquirer tried to blackmail Bezos, saying apparently Bezos and Sanchez were exchanging, they were sexting and sending sexy pictures to each other, though my wife always laughs at the idea of a Bezos sexy picture. But the Enquirer threatened to make these sexy texts and photos public unless Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, agreed to publish articles saying that the National Enquirer isn't guilty of anyway. it's what I like is that LA's most bodacious weather girl is in the middle of this article, which has implications for the future of the Inquirer, and the publisher David Pecker is really good friends with Trump. So in the middle of this big political I like that LA's most beautiful weather girl is in the middle of the political mess that is currently going on. All right, what next?
You spent a statement on the way over here, Mr. Rick Rosner, that Trump's team is stupider than...
Yeah, all right. So let's have a fight, because I believe that just based on everything I've seen, that the average Trump supporter is dumber than the average American. That the bell curve of IQs or of Trump supporters lies largely to the left, to the low side of the bell curve of IQ distributions of all Americans. You have two bell curves, where IQs go from 40 to 140, and another IQ curve where IQs go, you got two humps. One's Trump people, that's about 10 to 15 points lower than the hump, the bell curve of everybody else. Just based on the tweets I read and the articles I read, and just like, and there are smart people who support Trump. There are smart people who support conservative values, but a lot of smart conservatives have been driven away from today's Republican Party because it panders to values that a lot of conservatives are distressed by. And I think there's a brain drain in the modern Republican Party. It doesn't mean there aren't stupid liberals, but on average, or if you take the aggregate, I think that today's Republican Party panders to dumber people.
You say Kasich is one of the smarter, John Kasich?
I don't know. I mean, he's a standard Republican, except that he hates Trump. Kasich is the governor of Ohio who ran for president in 2016 and may run for president in 2020. Well, today, Amy Klobuchar became the 5th Democratic politician to announce she's running for president. And it's expected that another dozen or more Democrats will join the race over the next, 6 months? And then the question is, will any Republicans attempt to primary Trump? That is, for instance, there's a thing called primarying, where there's an incumbent president who intends to run again, a first-term incumbent, and primarying is where a member of his own party challenges the sitting president for his party's nomination. For instance, in 76, I believe, you know history better than me. No, in 76, Ford was primaried by Ted Kennedy for half a second. Is that right?
No, it was Reagan primaried Nixon in 72.
Okay, all right. So our director's saying that
Ford was primaried by Reagan, and he was president. Then Kennedy primaried Carter.
No, Ford
okay, yeah, I fucked that all up. Yeah, okay, yeah, Reagan versus Ford.
Reagan became president.
Wait.
Ford became president because Nixon resigned.
And
Right,
then he
yeah.
ran again, and he ran against Reagan.
Well, he didn't run again. He ran for the first time. He was appointed the first time.
Okay, listen to me very carefully.
He never won again. He lost against Carter.
No, but he was primaried by Reagan, who beat him up, and then by the time he got the nomination, Carter beat him. Then after that, Carter ran against Kennedy, who beat him up.
Oh, right. So
Okay, and
he
then
was
Reagan,
primary-
and then Reagan took out Carter.
You got me right.
Yeah. So in '76, Ford was primaried by Reagan. They were both Republicans. One was the sitting president. The other was a challenger from the same party. So the question, and in '80, Carter, the sitting Democratic president, was primaried by Ted Kennedy, also a Democrat. And the question is whether the same thing happens to Trump, which possibly depends on Trump's approval ratings roughly a year from now, or 10 months from now.
Warren says he may be in jail, right?
Well, our director says, Elizabeth Warren says that Trump may be in. He's not going to jail. I don't think Trump is ever going to prison.
She suggested.
But his hold on the presidency may be more precarious a year from now. But anyway, you got any comments on any of this stuff?
Well, I'll take them in order. First of all, Republicans may be dumb, but they don't favor murdering babies that could live by doctors. And I don't ever want to be that smart, Rick. If increasing my IQ to yours means that I'm in favor of murdering babies in the third trimester, then I'd rather be just as dumb as I am. And I also think that I don't think that a president loses when there's peace and prosperity. So what we have right now under Trump is peace and prosperity. By the way, that reminds me of something. Last week, another one of the problems we have is that it's not that you disagree with me. It's that you can't accept reality, even though you've got this really high IQ.
All right, go ahead.
A few weeks ago, I mentioned as one of Trump's accomplishments that he had defeated ISIS. And you disagreed. You said, no, there's still 20 to 30,000 still left alive. Well, it turns out that so you wouldn't give him credit. You were so mean-spirited that you couldn't give him credit for defeating ISIS.
He's knocked out the. Well, all right, no. Well, let me give him.
Let me finish my sentence.
All right, fine.
So it turns out that this week the Syrian Democratic Forces are beginning their final push to close up the final pocket of dead-enders. The last few thousand ISIS people are about to be destroyed. Now, when they do that, will you give him credit for defeating ISIS?
Yep.
Or are you still going to argue with reality?
No, I'll give him credit. If it turns out that there aren't frickin' a couple tens of thousands of ISIS people still tooling around that miserable section of the world, yes, I will give him credit.
Okay.
Though
So
not sole credit, but yeah, I'll give him. I'll even give him possibly the lion's share of the credit, depending on what I read about it. But yeah.
So, I mean, my point is that who's going to vote against peace and prosperity? Why would the American
Here, I
people
will give.
Yes.
Now, some of this is luck of history. That, in addition to, I think, not being the best president ever, George W. Bush was one of our least lucky presidents, because 9/11 happened on his watch only a few months into his presidency. He'd only been president for less than 8 months when 9/11 happened. So, and given the lack of coordination among America's intelligence agencies during that period, possibly any president wouldn't have stop 9/11. There are all sorts of stories about there being warnings that something was brewing, that the chatter that there was about to be an action against the United States that were ignored by the president and the rest of his administration. But really, anybody had Gore won, 9/11 probably would have happened regardless of who was president. And Bush was unlucky enough to have 9/11 happen on his watch. And then there was the economic collapse of '08 when all the mortgage-backed securities went bad. And that mostly wasn't his fault either. It was his bad luck to be president during that era. And so, Obama inherited a couple wars, and you like to argue that he really fucked them up. But he had these wars that he inherited. Trump has inherited the tail end of some of the same wars, and hasn't gotten us into any. He's pulled out some troops, and he hasn't gotten us into any new wars, which is to his credit to some extent. Though also to some extent he's been lucky in that direction, but mostly no, he hasn't. He hasn't gotten us involved in any. You can argue about the efficacy of his negotiation with various foreign powers, but yeah, you do kind of have to give him credit for not, to some extent, for not getting us into any new conflicts.
Okay, next subject.
We talked about the last week. Hold on 1 second. Just verify. So why?
Oh wait! I'm sorry. Hold on. One more thing. You said peace and prosperity. There have been a bunch of articles lately about it's tax season, and a bunch of people are. At least there are a bunch of articles. We don't know the statistics or the demographics about how many people are actually pissed off about their taxes this year versus previous years. But there have been a bunch of articles saying that Trump supporters are shocked to find out that they're not getting more money back this year under Trump's tax reform. The tax reform hasn't really helped them. And
what newspaper was giving these articles?
I don't know. I mean, we can look it up. We can break and look it up. The last article I saw said that, according to this article, people are receiving 8.4% less in federal tax refunds than they did last year. But I don't know if that really means anything, because a tax refund is really just the government returning money that was withheld from your paychecks. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying more in taxes. It's hard to sort out at this point. And it's hard to say, I don't know. I didn't read I just saw the headline base, so I don't know. But anyway, that could be a thing.
All right, what else do we have to discuss?
Yeah, so we want to, Rick and I, on the way we were talking about why would anybody want to be president?
All right, so we've got at least 5 Democrats have declared they're running for president. And on the other side, Trump himself, why would he want to be president? He's a guy who, rich, and enjoys a very, lifestyles of the rich and famous lifestyle. Why would he, and he who says that he's losing money as president, why would he want to do that? Why would somebody want to put themselves into the current, meat grinder of current national politics? I argued that, I remember, this is just me. I remembered when I ran for president of my school in high school. And I had two thoughts. I thought, maybe I could help the school. And I also thought, maybe I could get a girlfriend because I was president of the school, and maybe I could lose my virginity. And, you know, it makes you, I'm not sure that my motivations were that much different from other people who run for politics. Like, why would somebody want to be president, Lance?
The same reason I'm doing this show. I'm doing this show to try to help America. I think that the best explanation is always the simplest, because they want to help America. I even think that in their own sick way, the Democrats think they're going to help America. They just don't know how. Now, there are people that just want to take over because they want power. I mean, that's a reasonable explanation for people like Hitler and Stalin. So there's a mixture of ambition, self-interest, wanting power. But I would say that of the politicians in the country, a lot of them are actually trying to help the world.
Okay, all right, so we can move on.
Lance, of all the front runners, if there was one Democratic person, who would you be most comfortable with as president? You have Kamala, you have Booker,
Yeah, I know.
Warren.
I would not be comfortable with any of them. I mean, it's like you know, how would you rather be killed? You know, so I think they're all scum of the earth. I think they're fools.
All right, so who was the last good not counting?
He's got to finish them.
No, but he said he was just going to say, no,
Right, okay.
who was the last good Democrat?
The last good Democrat. I think JFK was a fairly innocent, if bumbling president. I don't think he wanted to hurt America particularly. As far as really, I think Truman was good. Made some tough decisions about the bomb and shepherded us through the Cold War, but not great. I really don't think there's been a great Democrat president that I can think of since. No, I think in general it's a cursed party. The first president to use the word Democrat in his title was Jefferson, who was the head of the Democratic Republicans, our third president. But the first true Democrat was Andrew Jackson, and he was our seventh president. And he was, you want to talk about atrocities against blacks and Native Americans.
Yeah.
But no, in general, I would say the Democrats have been a scourge on the United States since they began the Civil War, and have really not changed much. Wilson was a disaster. Roosevelt brought in the socialism to the U.S.
So wait a second. You don't think we should have had the Civil War?
Well, the Democrats started the Civil War against the Union. The Civil War was actually Lincoln and the Republicans versus the Democrats in the South. And fortunately, the Republicans beat the Democrats in that war. And in the next war that the Democrats start, I hope the Republicans can defeat them.
All right. Well, I mean, it was 157 years ago.
Right, but it was still Democrats versus Republicans. And the Democrats were the South.
Okay, but, I mean, the party's stances have changed quite a bit in 157 years. I'll give you, Eisenhower was a pretty great Republican president. Nixon had severe problems, but I've always liked him because
You told that story. He
Yeah,
reminds
yeah.
you of you.
Yeah. And he started the EPA, didn't want to, but he saw that America was for it, started the war on cancer, opened up diplomatic relations, really opened up diplomacy between the US and China, and was pretty active in diplomacy with Russia. I know he did a lot of decent stuff, even though he got crazier and crazier. All right.
All right, do we have any other subjects?
Yes, we had Trump is going to be going to El Paso. And
Yeah, this week he's going to go down and talk about border security and the wall. And, or the deal, what I hear from my media is that various officials, state and local officials, having to do with El Paso, say that Trump is going to say that a wall reduced crime in El Paso, and the actual mayor of of El Paso says no, that crime dropped in El Paso long before any kind of wall was put up. That El Paso has always been a relatively safe city. Now it's a very safe city, and that crime really dropped in the 1990s. 10 years before the wall there was put up in 2008.
Well, I know that the people in San Diego say that the wall really cut down on illegal immigration. So, in cases like this, Rick, I wish you would use your brain. I mean, you've been blessed with this astronomical brain, a higher IQ than Stephen Hawking, and you can't think it through and just say, would a wall cut down illegal immigration? I don't know, that's a tough one. I think I'll think about that.
But you know what I've actually said a million times.
I think it would. I think it would. Just using my logic.
All right,
I don't know why you have to depend on these studies and things.
Well,
Can't you just think it through?
Well, I kind of depend on what I've read, which is the westernmost expanse of the border is not the Rio Grande. The westernmost third is along the California and Arizona border, little teeny bit of New Mexico. It's in kind of an arbitrarily drawn straight line. And we threw up a wall and fencing along that whole area there where there's not a natural geographic barrier. And yeah, a wall makes sense there.
Okay.
Then but between El Paso and Juarez, most border towns are actually two cities on either side of the border. You've got Tijuana, San Diego. What's Brownsville's deal? You got Brownsville and...
it's Matamoros, and then you have McAllen and Reynosa.
Okay, and you got El Paso and Juarez.
Right.
Juarez is a hellhole, right? Juarez is
El Paso, yeah.
Yeah, but Juarez is a terrible place. Like women get murdered there just all the time. It's been going on for 15, 20. It's bad. But El Paso, on the other side of the Rio Grande, which divides the two cities, is a pretty safe city. Now, I'm sure that security between the two cities, which are kind of to some extent two halves of the same city, could be increased. Does it mean you throw up a wall, on one side or of the Rio Grande or the other, or you throw it right down the middle of the river? I don't know. Or do you do other stuff? I don't know. But yeah, sure. Reasonable increased border security makes sense. Whether it takes the form of a wall where you have the Rio Grande, I don't know, because I'm not an engineer. I also know that the whole wall thing, increased border security, both are politically loaded terms that don't mean exactly what you'd think they mean, and that each party has so.
Here's where the brainwashing comes in, guys. You can't just go with his logic. Now he's got to be. Now the brainwashing enters in. It's all. It's
All right,
all
let me
involved.
go this far. I'll be disappointed if at the end of this fight between the Republicans and the Democrats, that there isn't at least a billion or two in increased funding for border security. I'm fine with that. It would be bullshit if after all this fighting that nothing gets done. And I don't know.
All right. Very good.
All right, what's the next thing?
Okay, so we have 5 Democrats, or we talked about various Democrats that are running.
Klobuchar, Gillibrand, Booker, Warren, who else? One more.
Camilla.
Oh, yeah, Kamala Harris. And then there's going to be another 10, 12 Democrats who announce. Okay, so go ahead.
Yes, so of those folks there, there's a bloodbath how are they going to take on each? What do you predict? Is it going to be a bloodbath? Is it going to be a nice gentle lady and gentlewoman debates? Or how do you foresee them taking each other out?
Yeah, well, all I know is what I know from Twitter.
Okay.
And on Twitter, like Amy Klobuchar, there have been a bunch of articles that just came out that says she's mean to her staff. She makes them cry. She's had a bunch of turnover in her staff, and a lot of people she's having a hard time hiring a chief of staff for the election because she's mean. And then on Twitter, everybody says, well, this is not a criticism that would be made of a male candidate. So people in my neck of Twitter are saying that women are being subject to increased scrutiny that male candidates wouldn't be subject to, which probably is true, but may not be as important as the idea that a lot of the bloodbath / horse race stuff comes from the media itself rather than the candidates. I mean, one reason that Trump got so much coverage during the 2016 election is because he gave the media the bloodbath they wanted. He came up with nasty nicknames for the other candidates. He didn't hold back, and that made for great media. So we can assume that any kind of contentiousness among the candidates will be feasted upon by the media. And so, I don't know, will a dozen or more Democratic candidates be able to maintain a civil, campaign? Is doubtful. If Bernie jumps in, then like the Bernie Bros are kind of known for, being contentious, and I don't know. Yeah, so their civility will erode. I don't know. Will it erode to the point that it's as nasty as 2016? I don't know. Lance?
No, the thing that scares me, we're dancing around the issue. What frightens me is that the Democrats are socialists. Both Cortez and Sanders are avowed socialists. What's her name? Pocahontas.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, she supports a variety of socialist policies. And what scares me is that the Democrats are basically, they're adopting socialism. And I don't know why, when the entire world is trying to throw off socialism as one of the worst experiments in human history since child sacrifice, all of a sudden they're trying to get on the socialist bandwagon.
Well, let me ask you what
So
the most.
I don't know why my fellow Americans are voting for this.
Let me ask you what the worst aspect of what you call socialism is. Is it income redistribution through taxation?
What's bothering me is that Democrats always have to deceive their followers. So, it's been painful trying to get Rick to agree that we should have a border wall, even though the Democrats are against it. It's been difficult to convince him that they want to kill babies.
Because they don't. Nobody wants to kill frickin' babies.
It's been difficult to convince him that they want to end nuclear power. There are 100 things that they have to lie to Rick to get him to vote on.
Well, no.
Now Rick doesn't know what the difference is between capitalism and socialism. It's too complicated.
Well, no, I'm asking you, what's the biggest deal?
They can't. What I'm trying to say is, the Democrats can never be honest. They can never say, look, we're for third trimester abortion. They have to convince Rick that that's not really what they're for. They can't say, listen, we're socialists, even when they say they're socialists.
Okay.
Wait, let me speak.
Okay.
Cortez and Sanders were members of the American Socialist Party, the Democrat Socialist Party. And he still doesn't believe that they're socialists. He doesn't even know the meaning of the word socialist.
No, wait.
Now, my question is, why is it that the Democrat Party has to deceive its followers? Why can't Rick know what they believe? I'm a Republican. I know exactly what Republicans believe in. I agree with almost all of their policies. I don't understand. The Democrats realize that they have to lie to their voters. So, Rick, gosh, I don't know. It's a tough one. Why should we have socialism in America? I don't know. It seems to me hard to comprehend. What does even socialist mean? Is that your question, Rick?
No.
What is socialism?
No, what I was
It's too
asking
hard.
you. No, I have no problem in saying that. Yeah, AOC is socialist. Bernie is socialist.
And Warren is also socialist. She
Okay.
wants a, yeah.
Okay, so but what I'm asking you is, what's the worst part of socialism?
Are you going to let me answer without interrupting me?
Yeah, but I asked you that, and then you filibustered kind of.
Are you going to?
Yeah, go ahead. Just go ahead. Go ahead. What's the worst part?
Okay. In order to have a socialist economy, a socialist country, you have to force people to do things against their will. You have to force them to work for the government and to redistribute wealth according to the goals of the government. And people don't want to do that. People don't want to follow what the government tells them to do. And as a result, in China, between 40 and 80 million Chinese citizens were slaughtered. In Russia, between 25 and 40 million of their own citizens were killed. Venezuela was destroyed recently. North Korea is a hellhole. Every place that socialism is tried, they have to murder millions and millions of their own people. It isn't a question of which policy is the most important. Taxation, healthcare, separation of church and state. All of those things are irrelevant. What is relevant is that the more socialism you have, the more coercion the government needs. And the more coercion they need, the more ultimately it ends in dictatorship and the murder of millions of people. So I am against the Democrats' Party infatuation with socialism. I want to stop it wherever I can. And I'm trying to keep this country the one bastion of capitalism and democratic freedom and independence. But Rick is willing to vote our country into a dictatorship without realizing it. He doesn't even know what it means.
Okay, fine. So let me display my what you would call my ignorance and brainwashedness. Yes?
But hold that thought, I know you can hold it because you have a big brain. And this will maybe be part of your discussion. Just last night, Pelosi was pictured at this huge Grammy party here in LA, right? Tonight you had the Grammys, you had all these musicians and artists, and, about peace and love. And the reality is, like, less than 2 miles away is friggin'
Skid Row?
Skid Row. People literally, I mean, do you find any hypocrisy in that? Particularly like Pelosi, who's been in office for decades and decades and decades, and she can party like, Rome is burning, and then you have these people like suffering in the streets. Any comments on that for both of you guys?
Well, I remember when Ariana Grande was playing a concert in Birmingham, England, and somebody set off a bomb, right? Mm-hmm. I think, and quite a few people were injured and killed, and she got the hell out of there, she was criticized for not hanging out and sharing in the grief, but she came back like 2 months later and played a benefit concert for free and I thought that was fine, that she behaved reasonably. She got the hell out of there, and then she came back and she did a benefit concert to show, to help with the victims and help with the healing. And we live in a celebrity culture where, one of the things Trump has done that is commendable is that he's done some prison reform, which he was urged to do by Kim and Kanye, who live lives of public excess. Yet they managed to get Trump to do prison reform. I think people can be both, famous and rich and still care about stuff, about the less fortunate. And then this takes me back to what I was going to say about socialism, which is, and we've talked about this before, that of the 190 some or 170 some countries ranked on the world socialism scale, the U.S. is the 16th least socialist country. We're in the top 10% of unsocialist countries. We're a capitalist country. And right now, the income inequality, the amount of America's assets owned by the top 400 richest families in the U.S. is equal to the amount of assets owned by the bottom 60% of Americans, the bottom 200 million Americans. So 400 families, the 400 richest families, have as much money as the bottom 200 million Americans. Taxes are, were we a socialist country in the 1950s and 1960s when the top federal tax bracket was above 90%? I just think we're never going to be a socialist country. I hope we're never a dictatorship. And I think that given the things that are good about America, democracy, capitalism, our vast human resources, our vast natural resources, our love of liberty, all this stuff that makes America America, I think allows us a certain leeway for some policies that can be called socialist. There are people on Twitter that say taxation is theft, And I don't believe that that's always the case. Taxes pay for, I love the public libraries. I like roads that don't fuck up your car. LA's roads are terrible. And, I like the idea that, I grew up, you and I, we all three of us here went to public schools and got, I thought, pretty good educations. And I like all that stuff. And if we have to pay taxes to cover that stuff, I'm okay with it, even though, the taxation is theft. People would say it's theft and it's socialism.
Yeah, that's how they confuse you. I'm going to interrupt now because
Go
I'm
ahead.
afraid you were going to go on forever. Okay, first of all, I want to address a larger issue, and that is that Democrats always think that because America is powerful, it's not going to be ruined if they ruin it just a little bit. But let me get to a specific thing. The Democrats in California have got it from the 5th biggest economy in the world to the 7th biggest economy in the world, because they're driving the businesses out with regulation and taxes. And one of the things that dealt with your question, how could they party when just a few miles down the road there's this incredible poverty? Well, see, the Democrats helped create that poverty because what happens is they made it illegal to enforce the vagrancy laws. So now what happens is California is like a third world country where it is legal for you to sleep on the street in front of a business. And what is happening is, as the tent cities are expanding of these poor people that you're concerned about, they are destroying the businesses in the area. They're taking nice areas that were thriving and filling them with crime and, situations where people don't want to go to those areas. Another thing that the Democrats are doing is they're limiting the amount of housing you can build by regulations. And so what's happening is they're making it harder and harder to build a house, but they're making it easier and easier for people to sleep on the street. Now, recently, because the muddle-headed, well-meaning Democrats thought that they would try to help the situation, so they allocated a block of land in the middle of LA because they couldn't drive the homeless out of LA. That wouldn't be socialism. And they got them a block of land in the middle of LA that was worth $200 million. And they're able to take maybe 100 homeless people into this block of land. Now,
Where's the block of land?
I don't know the exact details or the date or the name of the bill, but I can look it up.
Is it down by Skid Row or is it someplace else?
I can look it up if necessary, but that's not germane to my point. My point is that if the Democrats weren't so stupid and socialist, what they would do is they would enforce the vagrancy laws, and they would build cheap tent cities out in the desert where people aren't going, and they would force these people to live in these tent cities instead of in the middle of downtown. And they could use, if they're going to allocate $200 million, they could use the $200 million to try to help get these people off drugs, or train them for jobs, or get them into mental homes, which is generally what they need. But the Democrats, it's against the principles of socialism to separate homeless people from wealthy people in the city.
All right,
So they don't do that.
Can I rebut?
Sure.
All right. So much of California has a severe housing shortage. And I would say that much of that housing shortage is due to the extreme success of capitalism in California. When you look what's happened in Silicon Valley due to the tremendous success of technology and all the technology companies in Silicon Valley is that there's no affordable housing in the Bay Area, the San Francisco, San Jose area, because there's the tech industry has created so many rich motherfuckers that they've driven housing prices sky high. Similarly, LA is full of rich entertainment motherfuckers. And, a bunch of rich people will drive the price of housing way up.
No, what's happening is the Democrats have passed a lot of laws that are preventing houses from being built in the state. We have a housing shortage.
Yeah, but
because they're not letting enough people build houses.
well, there are a shitload of apartments are being built all over. I mean,
No, we have a housing shortage. That we can look up if you want to. And
Okay.
it's because the Democrats are making it hard to build houses. Now,
Well, wait, let me partly agree with you.
And furthermore, in California, since the Democrats took over in the 90s, California is actually getting fewer and fewer people. For the first time in history, in the past, since the Democrats took over, more people are leaving California than are moving here.
Is that making other states purple?
Well, what's happening is they're moving generally to Texas.
And making it.
They're moving to Republican states that are governed by practical, intelligent Republicans, and those states have lower taxes and cheaper houses. So if you want to know what happens when Democrats take over your state, they create a third world type economy. We have more poverty in California than any other state. California is the poorest state in the union.
because we have more people.
When we started,
We have 40 million people, which is more people than any other state in the union.
No, it's because the disparity between, we have more poor people. We also
have more rich people than any other state.
We have more people proportionately on welfare as well. It's partly because the Democrats have allowed 3 million illegal aliens into California. Precisely the number that gave Hillary the numerical advantage in the election.
That's ridiculous.
Coincidentally.
We have more rich people than any other state in the union. We have 40 million people. We have more people in California
No, but I'm talking about
than they have in the entire nation of Canada.
I'm talking about proportion. Since the Democrats took over, we have more poor people on welfare, more people leaving the state, higher taxes, more poverty. Our cities are filled with homeless people that are camping out in the streets. We have outbreaks of typhus, and all because of muddle-headed Democrat socialists.
Yeah, well, you tell me a city that's dealt effectively with homelessness.
Well, in cities where they enforce the vagrancy laws, they don't have these problems. That is Republican states.
All right, so what's a Republican state? Texas?
Yes.
So should we break and look up homelessness in frickin' Dallas and Houston?
Sure.
Okay,
But I think
well,
we
let's
should really
break.
end the show, to be honest with you.
All right, how much more time do we have?
7 minutes.
I'm done. I don't want to look up homelessness.
All right, so that'll be homework for next week. We'll wrap it up, and hey, you can please send us money so we don't have to be part of the typhus spreading population.
I've noticed that we haven't received any money at all from our adoring fans haven't sent us any money at all.
Come on,
So-
lanceversusrick@gmail.com. Send us $2 that's our PayPal address. Send us $2.50. Send us $3.
Lance, you've been reading the comments. You want to give a shout out to any loyal fans or anything like that?
Well, you're all a bunch of cheapskates. That's all I can say to our loyal fans.
Well, we love you anyway.
Yeah, we love you, but we're not going to depend on you for any help.
Okay, thank you.
Before we have anything geeky you want to talk about, Lance? I mean, Rick?
No, I already talked about windshields freezing.
What can you just tell us real quick about pimples? Why do people get pimples?
No, I don't want to. I mean, I will say that Dr. Pimplepout. Some people like. My kid took the 23andMe genetic test, and one of the things they told her is that people with her genetic profile might be more inclined to be like pickers, people who look for like little things to pop up, and that's true about myself. But even so, like even though I'm a picker and a popper, Dr. Pimple Popper goes way too far.
I have something to say. Do you know, I actually was looking up, accidentally, I was looking up Rick. I was trying to watch her show, and Rick comes up on 2 or 3 lists of the world's smartest men. The smartest men in America. And I thought to myself, I have been arguing with the world's smartest man, or what? And there are a lot of people, I read the comments, and a lot of people are voting for Rick. They're saying, yeah, Rick is definitely one of the smartest men in America. So, Rick, how do you feel about that?
Well, IQ isn't necessarily, it's not, there's no good measure of intelligence. IQ is the best bad measure of intelligence. So, yeah, I think I'm pretty smart, but just because I've got the highest IQ in America doesn't mean that, I'm not sure you can even name the smartest person in America. Though there are plenty of smart people who demonstrate their smartness by not wasting their time on IQ tests.
Well, what do you think about these guys that are incredibly good at math? Like, you know, I mean, you're on the same list as people that graduated, that were teaching at MIT at age 8. And, you know, what's the deal? Why aren't you, what is the difference between you and them? Or are you just smarter than them? Because you're higher on the list sometimes.
Well, I've taken more IQ tests than they have. And I don't know, I mean, part of it might be a personality flaw where instead of working really hard and becoming a math professor, you know, I wanted to get a girlfriend, so I became a bouncer and a stripper. You know, that's not, you know, that's more, that's not an IQ thing, that's more of a sad little horny boy thing.
And wait a minute, Stephen Hawking apparently only had a 160 IQ.
Yeah,
You got
because-
him beat by 30 points.
Yeah,
And look
IQ
at all the
is
girls
to
he
some
got.
extent, IQ is BS.
He was cheating on his wife from the wheelchair.
Yeah, with his nurse, yeah. So, yeah, what am I going to say?
Rick, can you give us when you do math in the head, like in terms of addition and multiplication, is there a trick they use? Is there a secret that you can share with all of the aspiring mathematicians out there? Or?
I don't know. One trick I use is the difference the difference between squares for multiplying tough numbers. Like if you wanted to go 18 times 26, instead you could take the average of those two numbers, which is 22, square it, which is 484, and subtract the square of the difference between 18 and 26, which is 64. Wait, I fucked it up.
That makes it
No. Subtract the difference between 18 and 22, and square it, which is 4 squared is 16. So 484 minus 16 is 468, which should be 18 times 26.
Did you get that, Lance?
Now I was thinking about something else just then. I was thinking about whether I preferred sex doggy style or with me lying on my back. What was the question?
All right, so here's a better example. Instead of going 19 times 21, go 20 times 20 equals 400 minus 1 squared, which is 1, which gives you 399. That's a shortcut.
Can we end this show?
All right, there you go.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
You want to show one more shot of the
Oh, yeah, one
drawing
more shot.
before we go away?
Here's a picture I did of Rick.
That's lovely.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Lance.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody.